Thank you at home for joining us tonight for a very special Narrative Live. What we're going to do is show you some of the incredible video that we and many others have independently been finding in the Epstein files. Most of these videos have not been aired elsewhere, I believe. These are all brand new videos no one has seen before in the public sense. Of course, prosecutors have seen it before, defense attorneys have seen it before, maybe even courts have seen it before. But this is the first time that you and I are going to get a chance to look at these. So we'll be doing a series of these. Sorry, what we have for you tonight includes a police evidence tour of Epstein's special housing unit, his solitary confinement, where he was when he was found dead, or allegedly found dead, I should maybe say. It's an incredible tour inside the MCC's special housing unit. It really is a remarkable place. I've never seen it like this because this is done for evidentiary reasons. It's a police tour, real evidence from the files. So we're going to be taking a look at those. We're also going to be taking a listen to some of the deposition of Alfredo Rodriguez, who you might remember is the servant, I guess, house person who worked at the Palm Beach mansion of Jeffrey Epstein. At one point, he was trying to sell a black book, which apparently contained all this, what he called the holy grail of everything inside the Epstein universe. We'll listen to some of his deposition. We'll also we'll play you some tape from Ghislaine Maxwell's 2016 deposition, in which she talks about what she saw happen in the Epstein home in Palm Beach. She gets asked very directly about whether she witnessed any underage girls. We'll give you her answer. You'll see it in her own words. And that is all coming up later on tonight. Plus, there's some video I just don't even know what to make of it. I'm just going to show it and we can discuss it amongst ourselves, and you guys can truly opine as much as I am about what we're seeing, because it's all fascinating stuff. For those of you who've been tracking the Epstein world as closely as I have, it has been quite the few weeks we've seen. I mean, I think you'll all agree that everything that's happened with Prince Andrew, then with Leslie Wexner's extraordinary deposition. Today, we saw Lord Mandelson being arrested for crimes related to the Epstein file. These are not, as I said earlier on today, not coincidental. These things are happening, I believe, with the full blessing of the Crown and at the insistence of Prince William, who does not want to take over the throne with any of this baggage lying around in the Crown anywhere at all. So he is doing his job, I think, and responsible job of convincing the king to take the right steps and let this happen as it would for any individual who's not connected to the royal family or to the aristocracy in Britain. But that means what we're seeing is an actual rupture in the way the world has worked for hundreds of years. You know, royal families have for the longest time operated along with their aristocracies in a sort of an untouchable universe. And what happened with the arrest of Andrew, even if it was only for a few hours, was we saw a rupture in the way that has previously been done. Up until then, anyone associated with the Queen, certainly her royal family, was, above the law, could literally break any law they wanted. Now, specifically, it's the Queen or the head of state. So the king, in this case, could break the law with impunity, but they can also offer to keep their family safe at any one of their castles, and none of the authorities can actually go and arrest anybody while they're in the home of the Queen or the king, as it were. It sounds like really, an old-fashioned way of thinking of the world, but it is old-fashioned. That's exactly where it came from. That is why it's so stunning that what we had the other day was this extraordinary arrest, this change of 400 years of history. And what that tells me is that there is a rupture of massive proportions that is happening in the way the world has previously worked. And it's largely due to the pushing and insistence of people like you, who sit at home and who are asking the right questions all the time, asking the questions about why are some people getting away with these hideous crimes for decades, and now, of course, potentially including the President of the United States. And all that pestering and insistence and persistence, call it what you will, has finally got us to a point where these questions are being asked, and these questions are being heard by the son and the heir to the throne of King Charles. And I think that is a significant thing. What you're seeing is, I believe, Catherine and William really trying to pave a new era for the royal family that is going to, dispense with all the dark criminal adjacent, if you will, crimes of many, many years of the previous incarnations of the royal family. That's what I think is happening. Why does Charles need to step down? Is someone who's asking. I don't think he needs to step down, but he might. He's 77. He doesn't be there forever. Um, but he does definitely want to clean up the crown. And certainly this is his brother involved in this, and it's his mother who oversaw a lot of the stuff. So there's a lot of cleaning up that needs to be done. And I don't blame William or Catherine for saying, Dad, you got to fix this, because if you don't, we'll all be stuck with this for centuries to come. That is the background in which we are witnessing all this evidence pour out. That is the background that we're seeing Andrew being arrested. That is the background that we're seeing Lord Mandelson being arrested. And there will be many more. We've seen in the United States already a number of heads have fallen in the recent weeks. Kathy Rumsey of Goldman Sachs. We've seen other lawyers, Peter Attia today of CBS News. But there are certainly many, many others that need to fall. And those names have so far been protected by the institutions, by the DOJ, by the very institutions that are meant to be investigating the stuff. So when we think about Howard Lutnick and we think about Jess Staley, for example, or even Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan, you have to wonder why those investigations had never really started. Mary Erdos comes to mind. There are just so many, and it's these are not necessarily all people who were involved in pedophilia, but they were involved in keeping this criminal network financed and alive and funded to do a lot of the things that it did, which included the destruction of the American economy in 2008, which I've been covering in The Greatest Heist. All right, that's a lot of me talking. Let me show you some videos. Oh yeah, Linda Rothschild is of course another big name. So I did something I never thought I'd ever do, is frankly write the story about the Rothschilds, because as long as I've grown up, everyone's told me that every time you mentioned the Rothschilds' name, you were basically perpetuating anti-Semitism. I'm a Jewish person, and I don't want to perpetuate anti-Semitism. And I have resisted the idea that, that there is a family, a network of Jewish families that control the world, because I've not seen any evidence to that effect. And I still don't see evidence to that effect. But I do see a lot of evidence tying the Rothschild family to Jeffrey Epstein and to Jeffrey Epstein's universe. That is also how the crown fits in. That is also how the queen fits in, because the Rothschilds were the bankers to the queen. So when I'm reporting about the Rothschilds, I'm not talking about an anti-Semitic conspiracy, as many people might like to position it. I'm just talking about what I see as the actual facts of this banking family with roots around the world, with enormous power and influence. Their ties to Jeffrey Epstein, because they absolutely have a maybe 3 or 4 decade history. We learned from Leslie Wexner the other day that the Rothschilds had hired Jeffrey Epstein as early as in the mid-1980s. And they were still working for it. He was still working for them in 2016 when he died. Sorry, 2000 and what are my dates? It was screwed up. 2019 when he died. So there is a tremendous amount of history here linking Epstein to the Rothschild family. That is significant because the Rothschilds also happen to show up in Peter Thiel's universe. They also happen to show up in Andrew's universe because of the relationship with the Queen. Plus, they're involved in a whole bunch of other, called it covert stuff like arms trading and other things that involve Jeffrey Epstein. So it's a huge, huge thing to be saying these things, but I'm reporting just the facts that I found. And of course, the biggest, most incredible fact is that Ariane Rothschild is the most recognized communicator to Jeffrey Epstein. She emailed Jeffrey Epstein almost every other day. Now, that is more than anybody else. There's also people are saying Lynn, and I should be more prepared for my Rothschild's names, but there's Linda Rothschild, who also introduced Andrew to Jeffrey Epstein and also was involved with the Clintons. Absolutely, all of it is true. And by the way, this week that's coming up is going to be a lot about Bill Clinton and the Clintons, because they're finally going to give their deposition. And I want everyone to please pay attention to what's going to be said there. It is critical, I think, to the future of the American republic. What Bill Clinton decides to do, he's either going to speak the truth and liberate us all from this horrible nightmare that we've been in, or he's going to try to cover up for himself. It'll be interesting to see what he decides to do. But there is a lot of interesting information regarding the Clintons and Epstein's role in that. I have a lot of that I've never released from my interviews with Steve Hoffenberg when he was still alive, and I'll have those for you later this week. I promise. I'm going to bring you some of those exclusive moments where Hoffenberg explained to me exactly what Jeffrey Epstein was doing with the Clintons, how he was doing it, and it's really, really interesting stuff. But that's all coming up later this week. There's a lot going on here. And I think someone's just saying in the chats here, let the sun shine in. Indeed, this is the most important thing. I think the Crown is letting happen right now. And then everyone is finally going to have to accept that it's time to clean house. It's time for the corrupt forces that have completely gutted our world in the last 50 years for their own enrichment. The corruption has been widespread, has cost America $80 trillion or more. It's time for that to be cleaned up. And the sooner everybody realizes that, especially our representatives, the quicker it's going to be, because it seems like a waste of time that we're all spending our time, especially the GOP, covering up for this man when it's so evident that Donald Trump was involved with the Epstein network, that it's so evident that he was involved in criminal activity involving possibly children, possibly even murder children. We just don't know because we've never had a full investigation. And because he thinks he's above the law, which, is part of the point that I think Charles is trying to make. No one is above the law, not even his own brother. And if there is no more subtle message to the President of the United States, that includes him too. All right, so let's look at these various different videos. First up, these are from the Epstein files. Some of you have sent me messages in the last few weeks saying, you've got to change the suffix of all these things and then it'll show up as an MP4. It's not as easy as all that, but some people have been very successful at extracting it. I have not been too successful personally doing it, but I certainly have a lot of videos now that people have sent or that AI has been able to unlock for me, and it's all just fascinating. It's for someone who's quite into this stuff. It's really fascinating. I'm going to begin by showing you the evidence from the Epstein files, which takes us through the special housing unit, which is where Jeffrey Epstein was found dead. The SHU, it's called, the CHU, is a solitary confinement in the federal and state prison system. Inmates are isolated in a small cell, typically 6 or 9 or 8 by 10 feet, for most of the day, almost 24 hours a day, under fluorescent lights, which just sounds just horrible, with minimal eye contact, or human contact, I should say. Let's take a look at inside the SHU. What you're seeing is the sort of the shower area, the toilet area. It's not a great looking place. The MCC is known for being quite a awful place. Really, many people have called it hell. I've spoken to people who've been inmates there who describe it as the worst place in humanity. I think it's been shut down because it's the worst place like it's possibly imagine yourself living in. It's here that Jeffrey Epstein was found dead, under unusual circumstances. You remember a few weeks before his death, he was found injured in his cell with marks around his neck. He had originally told his cellmate, told the guards that his cellmate had tried to kill him, but then he changed his story that he had tried to commit suicide. And then he went into psychological treatment for a couple of days in isolation here at the SHU. And then he was let out of that psychological treatment. And then we get to the August 9th and 10th nights, which we'll go to in a minute here. Now, this area here is very cleaned up from the point that we previously have recognized this area, which many of you have seen that surveillance video. Boy, it's a very tidied up place compared to what we saw in that one grainy camera that they had basically pointed over here. It's pretty stunning that only one camera was available during that whole period of time. And it's equally as stunning that there are basically complete camera failures on the night of his death, which is still to be, it's impossible to actually explain the cascade of failures that happened on that night. It's just not possible. On August 8th, Epstein signed his last will and testament, which is an interesting thing to do. He was witnessed by 2 attorneys, gave a lot of his money to his girlfriend, and also his 2 employees, Richard Kahn and Indike. He was described as being upbeat before that, and then SHU staff did not conduct what they should have done as he was waiting there for that period of time. 30-minute rounds after 10:40 p.m. on August the 9th. They were supposed to do these checks on him every 30 minutes. Those did not happen. Let's get up here because this is really interesting. So now we're getting into this is the actual imprisonment area behind these bars. You'll see us walking in towards his cell. I've seen this video once, so we're looking at it together for the first time as we're wandering through here. That's the cell number, I believe. And this is not a pleasant place. This is not a place anyone would want to spend time there. It's very cleaned up as well, the way we're seeing it now. I'm told in the actual circumstance that was quite gross. Okay, so now we're going to step inside. I wish you could hear the officer, but he's just saying that we're going to go inside the cell. And this is it. This is the place where Jeffrey Epstein is said to have died. Toilet inside the actual cell itself. You might have recognized it from the photos that we have seen, because it's here that all those garments and bedding, and there's a lot of it that was captured at the time of his death. Apparently he was strangled here, but nobody knows for sure if that's true, because of course he was taken out of the cell before any photographs were taken of him. There's no evidence that he died here. Just we know the FBI arrived maybe 8 hours later. And I think that's, someone's asking, what did he attach himself to? And I think that's one of the most important takeaways from this particular scene is inside here. And I'll move it back a little bit so you can get a better look. Maybe they'll show it to us again. But look at these beds. Now, you're meant to, if he has committed suicide, he would have connected himself with some bedding, I guess, if possible, to these bunk beds. But I don't see how you can do that. I mean, do you guys see any way that you could possibly hang yourself off these? I mean, there's that ladder. I mean, maybe that's 4 feet off the ground. I don't know if you'd be hanging yourself off anything like that unless you were forcefully, I don't know, lunging forward and trying to strangle yourself on purpose. It just seems really, really difficult to imagine anyone, maybe off the windows there, but I don't think that was ever mentioned. It was always these bunk beds. And inmates that I've spoken to have said to me, it's just impossible. It's not really possible for people to commit suicide there because it's designed for them not to commit suicide. I mean, he would not be the only person who would have attempted suicide in a place like this. So they would be very concerned about designing a place that was suicide proof. And that, I think, is evident in these. It just does not make sense that Epstein was able to commit suicide here. Murder is maybe a different thing, but it just seems too bizarre. Now, of course, the staff there is also really interesting because the two guards assigned to check on his cell, Tova Noel and Michael Thomas, fell asleep at their desk for about 3 hours and then later falsified their records. I mean, that is a catastrophic failure. Now, maybe it's common for guards to fall asleep. I don't know, but it seems like a catastrophic failure. If you have that going wrong, you have cameras going wrong, you have someone who's able to enter the shoe, someone able to enter his cell, someone able to commit suicide, to commit a murder or something else for him to commit suicide there. It seems very, very difficult to understand how all of that happened. Nearly all of the cameras in and around the shoe failed that night. It's pretty stunning that this is what, in fact, we're looking at here. It was 6:39 a.m. on August the 10th, and I remember that morning really well when Epstein was found hanged in his cell. And I think by 8 o'clock, we already knew that morning. There were excess prison blankets, linens, and clothing, obviously, in the cell that we've mentioned. That's the cell you're seeing right now. They were used to create some sort of noose, but it's truly unclear whether there was really a noose or not, and what created that noose. And then he was pronounced dead at New York Presbyterian Lower Manhattan Hospital at 7:36 a.m. There are two schools of thought here. There's two pathologists who were hired, one by the family of Jeffrey Epstein, one by the state. Now, Michael Baden, who questioned the findings, speaking for the family, citing fractures in Epstein's neck bones that he argued for more commonly associated with strangulation than suicide or hanging. Epstein's legal team said the evidence was far more consistent with murder than suicide. And I think all of us felt that if anything happened there, it was murder. Certainly that morning when I spoke to Stephen Hoffenberg and told him the news, he was convinced he was killed, and he was convinced that it was Donald Trump who had killed him. And his brother in these Epstein files also files a report to the FBI with pretty much the same feeling that Donald Trump had killed his brother. And that's a remarkable thing. And we should do a full show and do this as a full segment, a full hour, and maybe Mark will join us. Maybe others can join us in terms of trying to understand exactly what happened that night. There's a lot of rumors Epstein is still alive, of course. We don't know if that's true or not. We can't speak to that. We can certainly speak to a lot of the questions around what happened in MCC. And this extraordinary video is really remarkable. And I'll post it in full below here because it's truly remarkable to think of how difficult it would be to operate a murder in there. And yet somehow that seems to have been what happened. And then equally, how would you hide all this evidence? How would you get people in and out? It just seems very, very, very difficult. But the actual location is just so interesting because we've seen it in so many different ways. And now to see it in this very clear video, this kind of real hellhole that Jeffrey Epstein, who had spent his entire life living a life of complete luxury, not his entire life, but a lot of his life, surrounded by the world's richest and most famous people, to find himself inside the shoe with, cockroaches running around, awful food, really dirty conditions, fluorescent lights day in and day out. And yet he was considered upbeat in the last few days before his death and was apparently cooperating with authorities, which I think is also really interesting, is that he was telling authorities names. He was giving information, which is why many people feel like is the reason he died. If you have any questions around what we're video is seeing here, please share them with me because I'll move on to the next one, but be happy to answer any of your questions. Were there other prisoners in that area? I'm not aware that there were other prisoners in that area. The video, Patricia Turcotte says, the video comes from the Epstein files. So this is embedded inside the Epstein files, not necessarily evident for everyone to see. You've got to find them, dig them, and change the prefix or the suffix. And then I had to analyze it and reformat it and do a whole bunch of things to get it to play out the way it has. But this may be the first time you're seeing it. This is video of inside MCC where Jeffrey Epstein was found dead. And we're seeing this video for the first time. And it comes from the Epstein files. This is an actual DOJ document. So fascinating, isn't it? I mean, it's truly, you might just think, hey, it's just another place, just another prison. But knowing how many times we've seen that layout from the security cameras, and we've read so much about this place, to be able to actually take you inside and show you what it looks like is very, very helpful to me as a journalist who's been investigating this story. And to everybody who I think has been trying to piece all these these pieces together. It's very difficult at the end of the day to make sense of all of this because so much of the logic doesn't hold up. Like, it doesn't make sense that he committed suicide in there. It just doesn't look like you could commit suicide in there. So if he didn't commit suicide, what happened to him? Was he murdered? How did a killer get inside? Is that even feasible? Or was this some elaborate escape? And if it was, where is he? Those are big questions. There were no cellmates when he died. I don't believe so. I don't believe that there were. In the initial suicide attempt, he had a cellmate. In fact, one of the things they do on the suicide watch is they always give you a cellmate because it's safer if you have a cellmate. You're not going to commit suicide. So they took him off suicide watch, I think the day before or 2 days before, and then they left him back in there. So it's a lot of questions as to how that happened, and we don't know the answer to any of those things yet. But we will certainly look for those answers and continue to investigate that. So that's one piece of new video that we found. Now, the next one is Ghislaine's deposition. Now, I'm not sure you're going to be able to hear it. And if not, we'll just play this another time. Let me see if I can find it here. So in 2016, they started investigating a new set of crimes against Jeffrey Epstein. And I guess they deposed Ghislaine Maxwell then. Let me just find the video. And I'm sorry to be a little distracted while we do that. There is a lot of video clips here. And I'm only showing you the ones that really, firstly, completely non-sexual in nature, because I want you to just use it as a testimony. And I'm not really in it for any of that other stuff. But this is Ghislaine's deposition. Now, you may not be able to hear the sound. So I'm going to play it a little bit and you tell me if you can hear the sound. And then if you do, great. If not, we will have to play it for you another time on a different system that we have. I'm guessing you can't hear the sound though. Can you hear it? Yeah. Okay. So there's no sound. It's unfortunate. I thought Substack had this sound feature, but I guess they haven't introduced it yet. But they will, and we will play it for you next time, or we'll do a separate show, or maybe tomorrow on the 5 Stack, I'll put it up for you. Sorry about that. It's good stuff, and you will see it. I promise. I promise. No, I've gone. What happened to me? Okay. Hi. I'm always playing with the new technology. I am the geekiest guy you've ever met. I'm the guy who worked at the video club at your school, who's always like staring at videos and running around with cameras. And for all of that, I still don't know how to work anything. And I should, but it just always work. There you go. I'm back now, right? Good. Okay. So I'll put that in the show tomorrow, on the five stack tomorrow. I think it's just really interesting to see her point of view. Someone, Rick, saying she looks absolutely pissed. She is very pissed in this deposition. As she's very angry in every deposition I've seen her. The latest ones where she's sort of providing cover for the president of the United States, then she sounds at least a little bit more, less antagonistic. But she certainly has never, ever expressed any remorse or anything else in any way as to what happened to the victims or what she did or anything like that. Seeing how we can't play any audio and the rest of these are audio based, I'm going to just show you a compilation of really strange photos and videos that I believe are related to Jean-Luc Brunel. I can't speak to what they're doing here. I'm just going to let you see these and read your comments as you share them with us. If it plays, here we go. All right, this is, the wild and wacky world of Jeffrey Epstein. And I don't know who this guy is. Do any of you recognize who this is? It's Jeffrey Epstein. This, I think, is taking place at their island. And why I say Jean-Luc Brunel is because I think that he appears in a lot of these photographs. This is the helicopter that he bought. It looks like Bill Barr, doesn't it? But it isn't. I don't think. Maybe it is Bill Barr. I don't know. This is that moment where Mandelson that's the Lord Mandelson right there getting a birthday cake. I don't know if it's Jeffrey's birthday or Mandelson's birthday, but that's a very big birthday cake. I think it's back up in the helicopter. It could be their private plane. It's all very tacky, but it's just the way they do things. That, I think, is Brunel, if I'm not mistaken. And they do certainly have the most, elaborate life. It's really a lovely life they led with there's Richard Branson. This is on Branson's island, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure who that is. Feel free to share names. These are the first time I've seen these. I don't know who this is either. So it's interesting that they were at Branson's place because it's just interesting. Branson's been labeled a pedo for years, says someone. I don't know that for sure, but he certainly has a sex-based reputation. The whole Virgin Airlines sort of makes sense of it. This is back at their island because I recognize that outdoor space. That's the Sultan, if I'm not mistaken, the famous Sultan who also recently lost his job as the head of one of the world's big shipping and port companies. He had to resign, multi-billionaire, but obviously compromised by the president, by Epstein, and also had these horrific torture videos were reported. I don't know who this really handsome guy is, this muscular guy is, but I'm sure there's a reason he's there. Do I know when these pictures are taken? You can see the numbers on the DOJ files at the bottom right there. So it's EFTA. You can look at all these up. 0003575 on all wins. So you can find these yourself. I'm not sure of the years, but I was really just intrigued by seeing them because it's a whole different world when you're living in luxury like this. Jean-Luc Brunel, of course, died in a jail cell as well. Also was about to help prosecutors with the investigation into Jeffrey Epstein when he died. So it always seems to be the same story, the same kind of story over and over again. Now, Brunel and Epstein, for that matter, sometimes thought of as being gay. I don't know for sure. And it's hard to tell. Certainly, Epstein had affairs with women. Some people say he also had affairs with men. This is a shooting range. I think this is am I mistaken? This is in New Mexico. Maybe it's not, but I'm not sure. The Zorro Ranch, of course, is in New Mexico where they are going to have an investigation in the next few days, which is going to start in the next few days. I don't know when they'll finally get to it, but how important is it that we get into the matter there and find out what happened at Zorro Ranch? Because that really was some of the most strange and bizarre events where it took place there. This, to me, if I'm not mistaken, looks like Cronkite. But am I right or am I wrong? I could be wrong. You tell me if you guys think this is. It's not Cronkite. Maybe it looks like. Am I right? Is it Cronkite? I don't know. It is. Yeah. I think of him as just, when I worked at CBS News, I mean, this was that place lived and breathed. I thought the ethics of this man, and here he is with Jeffrey Epstein, although he would not have known necessarily what was going on. Look at that fancy sports car. There he is wearing is that a police department? New police department jacket or something? Let me take a look at that. That's interesting. Can't see the label there, but it's interesting. All right, we'll keep playing. This must be, I think we are looking at pictures of New Mexico. It just looks like them. People are asking, what Cronkite, Cronkite was known to have been there, so I don't know what the background was, and I'm not sure, whether Cronkite would have been involved in anything. I have a lot of time for him, of course, and, I have just, I can't think of him in that way, but I can't think of any of these people in that way. And, but for all I know, he was a very, fairly decent guy. I would never imagine him involved in anything like that. But of course, a lot of people were just being brought down there to compromise them. They weren't there for knowingly to do what they were doing. They might have just been compromised accidentally, or they might not have been compromised at all. Are you at all unknowledgeable about MK Ultra? Are you all putting the pieces together regarding the scientists, techno-fascists, etc.? That is a very interesting thing. For those people who don't know, MK Ultra is this scientific experiments that were done on people to sort of control their minds using psychedelic chemicals and all sorts of other things that were very, I think, done by the CIA, amongst others. Was he connected to those? Who knows? He was connected to a lot of things that happened inside the CIA. I don't think the CIA has come clean yet on everything Jeffrey Epstein did for them, nor has Leslie Wexner. And, there's questions that are still out today about how this all connects to the Iran-Contra affair, Southern Air, which was a transport air company that was based out of Ohio, ran drugs. Those are all questions we need to know the answers to. Is this part of MK Ultra? I don't know if Epstein is part of MK Ultra. The CIA is involved in many things. Is Wexner potentially involved in drug running into North America? Probably. Arms deals back and forth? Probably, possibly. I don't know. It says I'm on 2 live feeds. I don't know how I'm on 2 live feeds, but if I'm on both, great. If I'm on one, great. I don't know. If I'm on none, then that's an issue because I'm obviously losing my mind and talking to myself. So I don't know the answers to your question around MK Ultra. I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered around that. And I think the CIA is doing a disservice by not sharing all that, but they may have their reasons. They probably do have their reasons for not sharing. I'm curious, there's something you alluded to a while ago. You were almost homeless because someone came after you. There was a time after I revealed that Jeffrey Epstein was a spy for the Israelis. It was an asset for the Israelis, which I did in 2019. I also revealed the story of the whole blackmail operation, the Compromat factory, as I called it then. I reported as well on something called Carbon, which was a Israeli intelligence front that was backed by Peter Thiel and Jeffrey Epstein. It became a very difficult time for me. They ran a few operations against me to discredit me, discredit my reporting. And during that time, people who I used to speak to on a regular basis just wouldn't answer my phone call, wouldn't come on my show, wouldn't deal with me. Rumors were being spread about me left, right, and center. Lost all my advertising contracts, was isolated in many, many ways. In other ways, they also try to, have people who were trying to recruit me, for lack of a better term, work around me. They had my story in a deal with CNN that I had. It was turned out to be a catch and kill kind of thing. There's a lot that went on, and homeless might be a stretch because I have lots of friends and family, I think. But I did lose a lot. I'm glad that I'm back from that, and I'm glad to have all your support here on Narrative. Without your support, there's no ways I could have been reporting these last 2 years. I literally ran out of money to keep doing it, and the story, I think, may have died along with no money, no funding. I don't think we would have been able to tell the story, and I don't think anyone else was picking this part of the story up, the part about the financial crimes and the more detailed network and the espionage network that I was revealing. So I'm very thankful to everybody who's here, and that's why we put so much hours into everything, because it's without you and your support, this does not happen. And this goes for paid subscribers and non-paid subscribers. It's just great that you're here supporting this and sharing it and reaching out to people to support the Epstein survivors and to your congressmen and to your senators, because if we don't, this is the last opportunity, I believe, to save this democracy. I really do. I think this is the only chance we have of saving this democracy, because Donald Trump believes that he can get away with murder. As he told people, he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. And for a while, that was true for him. It seems like he's gotten away with crime after crime after crime over decades. This is changing now. I think this is changing. I think people are realizing that with the arrest of Andrew, Lord Mandelson, all these details that keep coming out, the evidence from the files themselves are painting a very different picture of Donald Trump than people thought possible. Are they going to cadaver search the Zara Ranch? I know they're doing a big search. They've raised a lot of money or are applying a lot of money to it. I don't know if they're going to do a cadaver search. This is a long time ago. That's another story we actually broke here from the Epstein files a couple of weeks ago. Was this discovery of evidence from someone who worked at the Epstein Zara Ranch, who claimed that two bodies had been buried there, two Eastern European. It felt like the young women who were brought there were buried there. But this was a long time ago in that kind of environment in the desert. We just don't know what's visible now. Things could have been moved around. There's been a lot of excavation. We just don't know. But it's not impossible to imagine how young girls in these kinds of settings where there's violent sex and there's rape and there's all these terrible things happening, anything could happen, of course. Do you think Maxwell will go back to a real prison, and Trump, will there be enough to put him behind bars? Christina, I don't know if Donald Trump will land up being behind bars, but he really should be. I don't think there's anyone who can see the evidence that we've all seen, from Jan 6 to the Mar-a-Lago files to the Epstein files to everything we've known he's been involved in all his life. He clearly is a very protected person, but has he committed crimes? Well, almost without doubt. Do I think Maxwell will go back to a real prison? I think she will go back to a real prison. It will be a real mistake if they pardon her, and it'll be a real mistake to, in any way, entertain her weird notions that she is so powerful that she can change her story just to let Donald Trump give her a pardon, or to let the Clintons off, or whatever it is. The arrogance of Ghislaine Maxwell, as you could have seen through this video clip I was going to play, but I'll play it tomorrow, is quite astonishing. There's no remorse there at all. There is no guilt. There's nothing for anything that they've done. She's just vindictive and upset about the whole thing, that she's being inconvenienced. And I think that's just evident in the way she's handling all of this. Not once has she come forward and said, we did some terrible things. I'm really sorry. We should never have done those. Here are some names. All she's done is try to trade the truth to get out of prison, to get more comfortable conditions, to have all this access to this Club Feds resort that she's at. Just, it's awful. It's awful that that's happening. Is Wexner Jewish mafia and Mossad? Well, Wexner is Jewish. And is he Jewish mafia? The Jewish mafia is kind of an interesting thing. It's kind of a misnomer in a sense. I think that there is, like the Italian mafia, there are certain families that are involved in the Italian mob. Most are not. The Israeli-Russian mafia is what I like to call them. I think is the mafia you're talking about. It sort of arrived in Brooklyn in the 80s and have since mushroomed quite dramatically. They've sort of taken over the entire organized criminal circuit around North America. And yeah, Wexner was involved with the Bronfmans in the bootlegging era, whenever that was. He was reputed to have run a lot of illicit through his delivery vehicles for L Trade, or L Brand, and Victoria's Secret, of course. He's also associated with a couple of refuse removal companies in Ohio. He's largely considered a very protected man in Ohio, and he absolutely has ties to organized crime. Now, many people have suggested that he's part of this other organization, that there's this sort of like secret Jewish mafia thing. I've not seen that. I've seen, he has Jewish friends. He's certainly involved in all sorts of mobby kind of things. He's obviously done some things that have made him a very rich man, but is there, I don't know. I've heard of Mega. I've heard people talk about it. I've not seen it. I will not ask Whitney Webb. No, I will not ask Whitney Webb anything. Let me see what else is here. Epstein was more likely connected to COINTELPRO than MK Ultra. I'm not sure what that means. That's why I'm curious. It's all connected. Still didn't. What's going on in the immigrants' camps? Are they using the detainees for their experiments? I don't know if there's any experiments. I do know that there's a lot of money to be made out of imprisoning people and hoarding them and boarding them and moving them. And there's just a lot of money involved in these prison structures, in feeding people. It's a business. And, the more people you can feed into the business, the better the business does, which is why they're on such a huge ramp up to get as many of people inside those concentration, I don't know, warehouses as they can. It's a terrible, terrible state of affairs. America should, of course, not be doing that. There's lots of comments here. I really appreciate all your support. Thank you. I didn't realize I was so far behind on all these questions. Thank you. I appreciate you so much. And I appreciate everything you're saying. Just been doing what I've been doing. It hasn't felt very different. I just keep doing it because it's what I do. I'm a journalist and I'll keep doing it likely till the end of my life. Is this the real GM in prison? I think it's Glenn in prison. Sorry, so many questions here, just trying to figure out. We definitely need to firm up laws such that the wealthy won't get away with only fines anymore. I mean, certainly in 2008, when the 2008 crash happened, that everyone got away with it. There's a huge amount of crime that led up to 2008. People were defrauded left, right, and center. The market was crashed. No one paid the price for that. All the money was stolen, was taken offshore by sovereign funds. It's terrible what happened in 2008. And compared to earlier times when we had laws where people were prosecuted, in this case, they were not prosecuted. And that's the least of what we can look for is some sort of financial monitoring that does not allow banks and white-collar criminals to get away with this large-scale theft of the American economy, which we've seen time and time again. If you're wondering why your life is not as successful as it might have been, or as your parents' life was, it's entirely related to the fact that all this money's been stolen from America. That $80 trillion has been drained from the American treasury over the last 50 years. That's money that would have gone to making your kids smarter, making your kids' education better, giving them vocations, giving them industry to grow into, giving them healthcare, giving them all sorts of futures that have never been expended to them or given to them. So if there isn't a residual anger amongst any American about what's been happening to America since the 1980s with these series of booms and busts that have been orchestrated by the same network that is involving Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, you have to read The Greatest Heist to know all about that, then everyone should be mad as hell because everyone was a victim here. And especially the people who support him the most, they were the biggest victims of his crimes. The people who are uneducated, who are maybe on the periphery, the people who are not college educated in red states were probably amongst the biggest victims of the Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein's kind of crimes. What else is going on here? People are reporting sexual assault in ICE camps. Yeah, I mean, it's from day one, this has been a concern. And these masked men in American cities wandering around with impunity is ridiculous too. That's a cover story for so many people to commit crimes, and it's just completely unnecessary. Did Mark Epstein not see his brother's body? No. Did Mark Epstein ever get a death certificate? I believe the answer is no. He never got a death certificate because I don't know if there is one. There's a big questions that need to be asked and answered in the next while, but amongst many, many, many other questions. The end game of the billionaires. Well, here's what, in 2015, there was the equivalent of an earthquake amongst the very, very, very wealthy people. Under President Obama and Robert Mueller's attempt to end transnational organized criminal activity, they somehow allowed for the Panama Papers and then the following year, the Paradise Papers to be released. These were offshore registries of all the rich and powerful people's offshore holdings, whether they were in the Bahamas or Jersey or wherever else they have them. This is what's the place in Cyprus? There's another place next to Cyprus. It'll come to me. That was a significant. If you can imagine, all the richest families in the world have had billions and billions of dollars stocked away in secret holding facilities in these small, unmonitored offshore holding tax havens where they've never had to pay taxes. They've just held their money, getting richer and richer every year, maybe putting more money in there. I think that was a very Cayman Islands, someone just added here. That is one of those very significant moments that we tend to overlook, but it's incredibly significant in terms of, you think of who would benefit the most from controlling the Department of Justice, who would have benefited the most from, damaging America, from being so anti-Obama, from disrupting the Department of Justice. And then you look at all the players involved in electing Donald Trump, whether it's um, the Saudis or the Russians or the Rothschilds. They're all in the Panama Papers and Paradise Papers as significant offshore holding people. So I'm not saying I know for sure that's the mechanism. I know that a lot of the wealth stolen out of 2008 went into those offshore holdings, and a lot of the people who own those offshore holdings would not want to be in a position where they would have to pay taxes or anything like that. So that's why you get, that's, I think, what may have been a real moment for the very rich and powerful, the billionaires. They may have thought, along with the idea that Epstein seeded with the Russian government, that crypto was a real possible future mechanism to run the world economy and that the Russians could lead it. A very significant thing that Epstein was involved in, that in the start of crypto with the Russians. So yeah, those might be some of the end game. The end game is crypto, by the way. The end game is to absolutely weaken the American economy, especially the US dollar, allow the Chinese to gain dominance in terms of currency or some neutral currency. And then, you rob America basically of its treasury in exchange for crypto, which would then be, of course, immediately devalued, which I think is basically what's happened in a number of countries like Argentina and Venezuela. I'm going to end it now because it's been a long time. It's been an hour, and I'm sure you've got other things to do. Wasn't Robert Maxwell a double agent for Russia and Israel? He was indeed a KGB agent and a Israeli agent. I will say agent for both. I think he worked for Mossad. I haven't listened to Lisa in Voltang interviews George Tonks. I've read about George Tonks. What an awful story. What an awful story. Everyone wants to know when they can do. I haven't even finished The Greatest Heist because we've been so focused on book 2. I haven't had a chance to write up the last couple of chapters, which is the closing events. And because there's been so much happening from the Epstein files, featuring a huge amount of information about what happened in 2008. We finally found real proof, that 2008 and liquid funding was a big part of how 2008 crashed and how the billionaires were able to save their money in that network. So there's a couple of really important things that have to land in the next couple of chapters that explain to you how much money Epstein and Trump and Wexner walked away with out of liquid funding. And I'm sure that network includes our current Commerce Secretary. For those of you who don't know what The Greatest Heist is, it's a series I've been doing. It's based on my, now 7-year investigation into Epstein. A lot of it came from my time spent with Stephen Hoffenberg, who went to prison for 18 years for Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. Steve's a remarkable guy, was a remarkable guy who believed genuinely wanted to make good in the world and reveal the truth about what happened. He and I spent hours and hours together, and a lot of that is virtually on phone or on Zoom and stuff like that. I did meet him once for his birthday, as it turns out, for a film shoot. And The Greatest Heist is the story about how Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein performed the biggest crime in world history, attacking the American economy repeatedly, using Russia and other forces to help them do it, or vice versa. Russia used Epstein and Trump as their agents, as their assets, to attack America's capitalist system from within and destroy it. And the evidence is in 1987 and every crash that followed afterwards, we can see again and again and again how the system was collapsed, how people made money on the way up. They made money when it was sold. They sold all the assets at pennies on the dollar to sovereign funds who landed up now having a lot of America's value. And at the same time, every time Donald Trump went bankrupt, he would somehow bounce back and become a billionaire again, inexplicably, thanks to the Russian help or Epstein's help or whomever's help. His whole game was to do something called control fraud, which is about, running a company into the ground with massive debt and mortgage-backed securities in order to personally reap the benefits. That's the kind of guy who's in charge of this country right now. And he's probably doing the same thing to America that he's done to his businesses in the past. You can find The Greatest Heist Book 1, which deals with Russia and how the Iran-Contra affair was at the base of all of this. It explores the connections to Khashoggi and Robert Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump, how they all sort of were part of the same network, not sort of, we're part of the same network that all reported to the Russians and as part of the Russian strategy to destroy capitalism. And then book two looks specifically at 2008 and the build up to 2008 because there's just so much fascinating there. There are two more books, believe it or not, which I hope to write one day. Book three is about 9/11 and the circumstances around that. And then there's the current book we're in right now, which is sort of telling right now, is the cryptocurrency scam that they're trying to pull on the world. And that is happening right now. Why won't I publish this as a book? I don't know. You would think a book publisher would be interested in some of the stuff that I've been doing for the last 7 years. But not surprising to me, they're not interested in publishing this kind of work. In fact, they have such a hold over the publishing industry and the broadcast sector and traditional media that thank God for a Substack, or this would never really be out there. The only way to get the stuff out is for me to be doing it here on Substack. Otherwise, it would be buried. And so, I don't know. I think it's a good book. I mean, I may need some work on the book itself, but I would love someone to publish it. A Canadian book publisher, anybody. I've spoken to many people. I'm known to many of them. I'm surprised they aren't interested in a book like this. And if you are, let me know. And yes, I will self-publish as soon as I finish it and as soon as I've gotten through a few other things I'm trying to get done right now. But yeah, it's there's a lot of work that still needs to be done on it. But if you know anyone in the publishing world or anything like that, ask them the question why this is not being published, because it seems to me it's quite interesting. All right. So what else is there? That's it. Okay. I'm going to stop right there. Thank you very much for being here. This is not quite what I was expecting tonight. I was going to play you back all those video tapes, but great to have this back and forth and communication with all of you. And, I'll just say it again, without you guys, the story does not even begin to air anywhere. It's because of the support you've given me and the retweets and the posts and the work you've been doing to sharing this information to people is just phenomenal. And thank you so much for being a paid subscriber or a regular subscriber or just checking in every once in a while. I think it makes a huge difference that the story actually gets out. And so far, the Epstein files has not shown anything I've reported to be wrong. In fact, exactly the opposite. The Epstein files keeps repeating and validating all that research. There's nothing in there that isn't consistent with what we've seen in the Epstein files. I think what we're seeing, just to go back to where we started in the top of the show, is a real rupture in the way the world has been and the way the world will be. And if you're going to be praising anybody in the next few months, years, for this all comes to the way I think it will develop, it's really Prince William and Princess Kate who are doing this behind the scenes in a very, very interesting way. I think that's my perception of what's going on. I think that there's a clearing of the house before the next generation of royals takes over, and I think that is what we're seeing play out. That's why Andrew landed up in prison, the first royal member of the family in 400 years. It's why Lord Mandelson is now being arrested. It sends a chilling signal to everybody in Washington, D.C. and everybody involved in that network. If Donald Trump tonight is not terrified that Andrew went to prison, I mean, he should be, because no one is above the law, And as the king said the other day, King Charles said that, we must let the law take its course. Donald Trump thinks that it doesn't have to take its course with him. He's wrong. And the king is saying that. The arrest of Andrew is saying that. Lord Mandelson's arrest and charging today. They all say it. Tomorrow during the State of the Union, do me a favor, do yourself a favor. Make sure Epstein is trending. It should be the number one trending topic on every social media tomorrow. Just go for it throughout the entire State of the Union. He is going to go back and look at all those results, and I'm sure they'll have thousands of bots pushing every other trend you can imagine. But we should make sure Epstein remains the number one topic trending tomorrow on all social media. We'll be here live with live coverage of the State of the Union and a pre and post show. Although I can't really stand listening to him, we'll bring you the whole speech live. And we look forward to having you with us. So please join us then. Thanks for this 2-in-1 show. Sorry about the broken link, but we'll connect those two together and make them into one show. I guess tomorrow in the 5 stack, I'll play the Ghislaine Maxwell deposition, at least a few minutes of it. And then on Wednesday night, we can do something else. Or we'll go back through some more of this evidence that we've amassed, the video and photographic evidence from the Epstein files. It's 8:36 here in the East. Thanks for being on Narativ tonight. Thank you for being here. Really love having you on. And we shall see you all again soon. Have a great night.